Welcome to DBC. Today we are continuing with boundaries, and we're going to complete the second section of the book, which is about different problems with boundaries. Last time we talked about family and friends and spouses and children. Today we're going to talk about boundaries at work and boundaries with yourself. And we'll be almost done with the book after that point. So boundaries at work. There's a couple of different situations that the authors bring up of potential problems at work when it comes to boundaries. The first of those is carrying another person's responsibility. So the idea is that you have to first take responsibility for yourself. Your unhappiness, which is usually what happens when someone is doing more than they feel they should be doing at work, is to complain to their spouse or their friends about it and to get upset. But first step is taking ownership over your own unhappiness. And then knowing that that's yours and yours alone. And the idea is that to instead act responsibly to your coworker, not for your coworker. So have firm boundaries and empathize with their anger when you do this, because they're going to be angry with you. If a responsible coworker, however, is in like some genuine need in a short-term situation, it is okay to obviously support them and help them out there. Number two problem at work with boundaries is working too much overtime. And so there's a funny quote in the book that says that poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part when someone's asking you to work overtime or whatever to help out. But there are ways to help you. So that's to set boundaries on how much overtime you'll work. Like set that ahead of time so it's not a reactionary thing, but it's a proactively planned amount of time that you're willing to work overtime, if at all. Review your actual job description is another one. Make a list of the tasks that you need to complete in a certain week or a month and prioritize what's the most important one. And then indicate if it's out of your actual job description. And then they say just set an appointment with your boss to discuss work overload if you feel like you're going to burn out. And then remember that being work overload is your responsibility and your fault, if you want to think of it that way, your problem to deal with, which is a good thing because that means that you have the power to change it. Number three are misplaced priorities. So there's this idea that you should only do two things at work, which is number one, excellent work, and number two, spend time on the most important things first. Say yes to the best and no to the good is one of the sayings that they use. And the idea here is that the work you have to do, that you give yourself to do, will grow to fill the time that you give to do it in, which is a really powerful idea. In Tim Ferriss, he mentions this as being called the Parkinson principle. It says that the work will expand in perceived importance and time to take given the amount of time we're given to complete it. So think of if you have an essay, if you have all semester to write an essay, you'll take all semester. If you have a weekend, you'll get it done. If you have a morning to do it, you'll get it done also. Difficult coworkers, number four. So this idea of stress at work usually turns out to be somebody at your office who's driving the stressed out person, quote, crazy. And then so the law of power here is that from the first video, you only have the power to change yourself, not that other person who's allegedly making you crazy. So see yourself as the problem, not the other person. The real problem lies in how are you relating to that person. If you set boundaries with them and you stand by them, then there's nothing they can really do. Number five, critical attitudes. So stand apart from this person and keep your boundaries. So if someone's always super negative, just stay away, keep distance. You can't control them, but you can choose to limit your exposure to negative people. Avoid trying to gain the approval of this sort of person, which is something that I've done in the past. And it's just like, let them be. Don't burn calories on them. Conflicts with authority. So they say that many of these problems come from unresolved childhood conflicts with their parents, and it's transferred through transference to authority figures in the office. So when you feel negative emotions around authority figures yourself, step back and identify what's actually happening there. Number seven, expecting too much from work. So I was once told that it's not good to consider your work a family, even if you work in nonprofit field, because family has this connotation of raising people and meeting needs that aren't really appropriate to be met at work. A better metaphor is a team. So the work atmosphere should be set up to support employees in work-related ways. And the problem is if someone wants their job to support them in ways that their parents didn't, not good. So like primary nurturing relationships, self-esteem, and approval should not be coming from your job. The job should expect adult level functioning. We should not expect childhood needs to be met. And also get your relationship needs met outside of work. That will really save you a lot of unnecessary stress. Two more problems at work. Number one, taking work-related stress home. So understand work issues and face them directly so that work does not emotionally control your life. Find your own limits with work and live with them, again, with overtime and time. I think at times teaching people bring their work home more than they really need to. It's becoming more and more expected, but make a firm boundary there and stick with it. Number 9, disliking a job. Guess whose fault that is, or whose responsibility that is? That would be yours. So often this comes to people who have not been able to work with their own gifts, talents, wants, desires, and dreams because they're unable to set boundaries on others' definitions of and expectations of them. So that could be family or friends or peers or even a spouse. So you must stand up to other people's expectations of you. Those are problems that can occur at work. Now, how about problems that occur within your own self? So this really has to do with discipline. And so our out of control self. So for example, they talk about overeating. And that overeating is visible to others if you don't eat in front of them, like the body changes and others are aware of that. And the authors here claim that overweight people can feel an overwhelming amount of shame for their behavior. Food serves for them as a false boundary, and the authors here talk about it can be used to avoid intimacy, to gain weight, and to be less attractive to their partners. Interesting take there. Money, so impulsive spending, chronic borrowing, having ineffectual savings, and irresponsible money, another discipline with the self issue. Time, so the person that ends up frustrating not only others but themselves, someone who's constantly running late, this is not good for themselves or those around them. At the end, they realize, at the end of the day, they have unrealized desires, half-baked projects, and they're just knowing that tomorrow they're already running behind for tomorrow, and it's this constant cycle, and that causes stress and people to be less kind to each other in general. With respect to task completion, talking about time management, the key here is to be a good finisher and finish what you start. Self-discipline with the tongue. There's a cool quote from Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19, where they say that when words are many, sin is not absent, but he who holds his tongue is wise. So do we speak nonstop to hide from intimacy? Is a great question to ask yourself. There's a bunch of stuff about sexuality that I wasn't really in line with that I'm leaving out of this video. Alcohol and substance abuse, again, I think they're a bit old-fashioned and biblical, and they would admit as much. So one final set of questions is if you're finding that your no does not work for others, instead of being responsible to somebody else, be responsible for yourself in this case. So we tend to turn inward rather than outward when we're in trouble, but to acknowledge the fact that we do need other people, that we are relational beings. Willpower is not enough for self-boundary struggles, they say. We need relationships and accountability, which has been proven by science. But I would say, however, there are people where willpower is enough, but it's probably not you if you're watching this. And that's okay, but just know that you need accountability and relationships to get you where you want to be. Establishing boundaries with yourself. Last thing, and we're done. How to begin practicing setting boundaries with yourself if you're struggling with this. So, number 1, address the real need. So impulsive eating might be avoiding sexual intimacy or intimacy with a significant other or partner. So look at what's behind your so-called presenting problem to yourself. Number 2, allow yourself to fail. It's okay. Embrace that instead of trying to run from it or avoid it. It's okay. Step 3, listen to empathic feedback from others that's non-condemning and non-nagging to you. But listen to people that care about you. Number 4, welcome consequences to your actions as a teacher, as an opportunity to learn. And number 5, of course, surround yourself with people who are loving and supportive, neither parental nor rescuers. So on the spectrum of inappropriateness on both sides, being a rescuer or being a parental, maybe a really strong authoritarian, someone that's in the middle and that really wants what's best for you. So the boundary work that's described in this book can be extremely helpful in moving victims of trauma towards restoration, but due to there's a really severe nature of their needs, victims, especially of severe trauma, the authors say they may need, and I would say they need help in a professional setting in maintaining boundaries and establishing them. And this chapter on boundaries with God, too, a couple things I wrote down from that are just that boundary problems are essentially problems of responsibility, which is an interesting way to think about any boundary problem at all, is what am I not being responsible for, or what am I being responsible for that I shouldn't be? And this idea that when we are hurting, we need to take responsibility for that hurt and to make appropriate moves to make things better. So again, really internalizing your struggles and asking what you can do differently. That is almost the end of the book. We're done with the first 2 parts. Next, we're going to talk about actually finally developing healthy boundaries. So resistance to boundaries and how to measure success with boundaries. And we'll see you next time to finish the book.